Guys, we're going to start looking at photosynthesis. Yesterday, you spent some time getting some big picture ideas about how these processes work. Today, we're going to actually dive into photosynthesis and see how this biochemical pathway takes place inside plants. Then we know that all energy for every living thing on this planet comes from the sun. That's nothing new. And we know that you get your energy, your sunshine, one of two ways. You either get it directly as an autotroph, which means you're a plant, you produce your own energy, or you get it indirectly as a heterotroph, which means you don't make your own energy, you consume it as a consumer by eating plants or eating the cow that's eating the plants that actually captured the sunshine and made the energy in the first place. So, what is photosynthesis? It is converting light energy into chemical energy. And for us, this is our usable form. For plants, too. Plants have to do the second step to this, cellular respiration, to get that energy as well. They're just the masters at actually catching the sunshine and making it into sugar. How do plants do this? Well, they rely on the visible spectrum. During evolutionary processes, certain little prokaryotes started developing some pigments, and those pigments actually started helping them out. They could actually absorb different wavelengths of light. So if you remember back to physical science, you got to play with those prisms and hey, shine a flashlight on it. Look, we can make a rainbow. They actually started discerning the different parts, the different wavelengths of the sun, and because of their pigmentation, they could absorb those different parts within inside the cell, and it became an advantage to them. Normally, when we look at light, we don't see it. It's colorless, or what we refer to as white light. When you spectrum it out, you can see all the different colors, and all those different colors have different wavelengths, different energy levels, and that's what we're going to look at and see how they actually play out within inside the cell. So why do we see these different wavelengths, these different pigments? Well, it depends on what's getting absorbed and what's being reflected back. If you're wearing a black shirt in here, stand up, wave, okay, you're wearing something that absorbs all wavelengths, absorbs all color. Think of it like a black hole. It absorbs everything. Nothing escapes it. So go ahead, sit back down. If you're wearing a white shirt, stand up, okay? You're wearing something that reflects all color of light. That's why it looks white. That's why colorless light is what we call white light. It's bouncing back every single color of the spectrum. Now, if you're wearing different colored shirts, and if you're wearing white, go ahead, sit back down. If you're wearing something different colored, then you have different pigments embedded in your shirt. Some of those pigments maybe are absorbing all the colors except yellow, which is why I can see yellow here in the middle. Maybe you're wearing a blue shirt, which means it's absorbing all the colors but blue, which is why it's bouncing back the blue, and I can see blue reflecting off your shirt. Or here's orange. It's absorbing all the colors except for orange, and it's bouncing off the shirt, and that's why I can see it. What we're actually seeing is what color wavelength is being reflected, not being absorbed. Black, all color being absorbed. White, no color being absorbed. Here, different colors, different wavelengths being absorbed and others reflected back to our eye to interpret as color. Plants and some unicellular little photosynthetic autotrophs developed pigments over time. Evolutionary little strategy. Lucky them. They actually absorb colors, and they mostly absorb blue and red. What they're not absorbing is green, and that's why it's bouncing back, and that's why we look at plants and say, hey, these plants look green. But plants don't want to miss out, because remember, there's a broad range of spectrum of colors there. So they have little accessory pigments called carotenoids, which I colored in yellow because you can hopefully remember it by carrots. Carrots are yellow. They are absorbing the green. Okay, they're just not as numerous as chlorophyll, which does a better, bigger job of taking in blue and red and pushing out green. So basically, the chlorophyll is masking the colors of the carotenoids so that all you really see is green. But yeah, they're grabbing on that green and trying to make sure the plant captures as much energy as possible. So just remember that chlorophyll is a pigment it's absorbing blue and red wavelengths, and it's reflecting back green, which is why plants look green. Here's the overall chemical process of photosynthesis. Remember that if we're going to have a chemical reaction, then we got to have reactants. And the reactants for photosynthesis in this equation are carbon dioxide and water. The products is what comes out of the chemical reaction. This is what we're making. And I'm sorry for the horrible printing here. I don't have the subscripts in. We have C6H12O6, which is sugar, specifically glucose, and oxygen. We knew that plants put out oxygen. We know they make sugar. What we got to remember is that make this chemical reaction happen, we use light energy. So light energy takes carbon dioxide and water and reforms those molecules into sugar and oxygen. Now here's an interesting thing that maybe you started picking up on yesterday during your conversations. These reactants for photosynthesis are the products for cellular respiration. And these products for photosynthesis are the reactants needed for cellular respiration. These are reverse chemical processes, and we're going to start looking at that relationship and seeing how it really explains why we are so interdependent upon plants and they are on us to exist in our global system on this planet. So we'll make sure you write this down. We're going to break apart how these molecules go in, what happens when they go into the plant cell, how these molecules are coming out, and where they're made within the plant cell. So photosynthesis has two parts. There's light reactions. Light reactions are easy to remember as being light reactions because guess what? They take sunshine. These aren't going to happen unless the sun is available to make it go. So here we got light energy converting into chemical energy, okay, which is a temporary phase. We're actually making some ATP, which we all remember is a form of cellular energy. And then we get this little tiny carrier molecule, NADPH. Normally it's just NADP with an empty spot, and we throw a little hydrogen ion on it at the end so that it can move on to stage 2. But the first part is we got to start breaking down those molecules coming in. We're going to use that light energy to make it work, and we're going to make it into a temporary form of ATP and a little hydrogen carrier called NADPH. The second part is the Calvin cycle. That's a stage 2. We can also call this the dark reactions because I don't need sunshine to make this happen. This is where I'm actually making the sugar, and I'm releasing I'm releasing it back into the cell so the cell can either decide to use it right away in cellular respiration or store it as a starch for later use or for some happy animal to come along and eat. So what we're doing here is we're taking the CO2 in, we're using those molecules we made in the light stage, and we're going to make sugar. Alright, so here it is. We're going to put it all together. Light reactions followed by dark reactions. I like to think of this like a cookie factory. I'm making sugar. I'm baking, okay? If you remember, raise your hand if any of you had an easy bake oven as a kid. Don't admit it. Mr. Hepner had one too. His was pink. Very rare, I know, collector's edition. But it's like an easy bake oven. In the easy bake oven within a plant cell is called a chloroplast. This is where all the cooking is going on. This is where I'm making my sugar. I'm making all that wonderful stuff happen. So right here is the chloroplast. This is where my light reactions and my dark reactions are going to take place. But this is, for an analogy, an easy bake oven. So inside the chloroplast are two different structures. There's these little stacks of coin-looking things called thalloids, and then there's like a fluid stuff inside called stroma. The light reactions are only going to actually take place in the fluid part, in the stroma. So there's just kind of floating, they actually take, excuse me, cough there. They actually take place on the thalloids because it's like the machine part, the oven part of our easy bake oven. So we're going to be cooking on the thalloids, okay, to get things started. So we have to have our list of ingredients to do our baking. We need sunshine, okay? Imagine that like the light bulb in your easy bake oven. We're going to have our thalloids serve as the actual oven part itself. And the light reactions are going to start working on those satellites because that's where the pigment is. That's where the chlorophyll is. That's why they look green. And it's going to be the action of sunlight on those satellites, exciting in those satellites, getting them all worked up so that we can actually start breaking apart molecules. So if you look at it, this seems rather complex, okay? But we're going to make it super, super simple for you to understand. Okay, water goes into the cell, up through the roots, through transpiration, all the way up to the leaves, to the leaf cells, to that chloroplast. Once water gets in there, it's going to get split apart by an enzyme. I always just kind of imagine like, hey, you add water to a pot, you add heat to the pot, the water boils, right? Kind of the same thing in the thalloid. The water's going to boil where you can separate it to hydrogen and oxygen gas. This is where oxygen gas actually is created. This is where the waste product comes out because it frees up those hydrogens. And that's what I want. I want those hydrogens available to actually power a portion of the thalloid. And along the thalloid is a little membrane. And it's going to power along that thalloid and start running down it like a gauntlet and giving me ATP at the end. So I'm going to flip back to the previous slide. So here I have the thalloid membrane right here, this whole thing. Hey, bilipid layer. This should look pretty familiar. I got water coming in, and it's going to separate, okay? It's going to boil off, and I'm going to get some hydrogen ions, and I'm going to get my oxygen gas. Bye-bye, oxygen. You're a waste product. I don't want you anymore. You escape out to the world so humans can breathe you. But that gives me these little hydrogen ions. And this is the gauntlet that they're going to run. They're going to go all the way down. They're going to run this gauntlet, and they're going to pop off at the end as ATP. Okay? I need ATP for my Calvin cycle to work. Why? Because it's the dark cycle. I don't have light to power anything. So I got to have a battery energy source from somewhere, and that's going to be the ATP here. I also need some hydrogen. Okay, I can't make sugar without hydrogen. So my little carrier is going to come into play, and it's going to take it, and the ATP is going to go with it into the dark cycles. So that's what's going on here. This is a light reaction. I got water coming in, getting boiled up. Hydrogen's going to power and run this gauntlet called the electron transport chain. It's going to give me free hydrogen ions and ATP, and I'm getting oxygen as a waste product. We're going to go back now to we're going to go to the Calvin cycle. So here comes my ATP from my light reactions. I'm going to add my carbon dioxide, and I'm going to throw in some of those hydrogen ions because I can't make sugar without it. And basically you have this cycle. I just imagine it like a wheel. This is happening inside the stroma. So I'm in the fluid part now. Everything leaves the thalloid, goes into the stroma, and it's going to power this circle. I can't push a wheel without energy. So imagine that ATP coming in as energy, pushing this wheel around, pushing it around, pushing it around, pushing it around. So I'm going to throw in some carbon dioxide, I'm going to throw in some hydrogens, and boom, out comes sugar, C6H12O6. Okay, seems like a lot, so let's see if we can get a big picture of it. Okay, here's my light reaction. Light, water goes in, comes out, oxygen comes out. Why? Because the light boiled it up. Okay, this is in the thylakoid. The hydrogen ions then are free to move along the thylakoid, and as they do, they're moving along something called the electron transport chain. At the end of that chain, I get ATP and hydrogen ions that I can move into the Calvin cycle. That ATP I made in the light cycle is going to power this wheel. I'm going to add my CO2, I'm going to add my hydrogen, I'm going to spin it around, and out of my easy bake oven comes sugar, C6H12O6. It's a pretty simple process if you let it be simple. Don't let it overwhelm you with all these little gobbledygook stuff. It's really a rather simple process. And when I make it back to class, I'll whiteboard this out and we'll take it step by step to make sure you understand it. The Calvin cycle, or the dark reactions, again, what happens here is I'm taking the CO2 and I'm fixing them into organic compounds. What's that organic compounds? Sugar, C6H12O6. Remember that this part happens in the stroma. Light reactions happen on the thylakoid. Right, this part is all floating around in the fluid. So here we go. You got carbon dioxide and water. Those are my ingredients, okay, my reactants. I'm adding sunshine so that I can get sugar and oxygen out. Light goes in, water goes in. Water gets split into oxygen gas. It's a waste product. Bye-bye. Those hydrogens that got left over by the water are going to run along the electron transport chain on the thylakoid membrane. They're going to give me ATP and hydrogen. That ATP is going to push that Calvin cycle around so that when my CO2 goes in and my hydrogen goes in, I can spit out sugar. It's that simple. That's what's happening to these reactants, and that's how I'm getting these products. First step, light reaction. Second step, Calvin cycle. All inside my easy bake oven called the chloroplast inside the cell. Sometimes, due to certain circumstances, that's not the easy way for things to happen for plants, and they have to find alternative pathways. One of those is called the CAM and the C4 pathways, and they typically occur in hot, dry environments. We're just nice to mention them, but we're not going to really focus on them too much. What you are going to do is you're going to work with your large table groups on the factors that affect photosynthesis. This will be a great place to end our work for a moment so you guys can figure out how light intensity, carbon dioxide levels, and temperature affect photosynthesis. Make sure you get ready to share your thinking with the rest of the class, and then we'll wrap it up before we move into Avatar.